You're listening to the City Podcast. Unadulterated, non-politically correct, unfiltered, real talk. The city from the inside out. With your hosts, Chad Cranston and Steve Mealing.
All right. Oh my God. So here we are. So sorry, everybody. My name is Chad Cranston.
I'm Steve Mealing, and this is the City Podcast. Our guest this week is...
What's your name?
No, don't.
What's your proper name? I want to know her proper name.
My proper name is Jessica O'Reilly. There's an Ann in there somewhere, too.
Jessica Ansi. This is very important to understand. So Dr. Jess is with us today, and I'm super stoked to have her on. You guys I gotta apologize for my voice.
Is it you're stoked or we're stoked?
I'm stoked. Are you stoked?
I'm stoked.
Well, we're both stoked to have Dr. Jess on. She looks beautiful today, by the way, as well, too.
You sound surprised.
Not very surprised. She always looks dazzling all the time, but I'm not about to toot your horn too much, Dr. Jess. My voice. I was yelling at the Raptors game last night, so you guys I gotta apologize for my voice. I think Steve and Jess are gonna probably do most of the talking. So thank you everybody for all your DMs and all your emails and all your support. Everything is going perfectly fine with us, man. I love this stuff.
So do you want to give an intro? Dr. Jess is all about some background. She doesn't have to say everything.
I think the best thing to do in this situation is for you to give us your background. How did you become a doctor in sex, first and foremost?
So he doesn't want to do the intro because he's been yelling at the Raptors. Yeah. So I was actually a high school teacher in Toronto with a Toronto District School Board working in an alternative school, and I had students coming to me every day with issues around relationships and sex. So they were in abusive relationships or unhealthy relationships, or they had STIs, it burned when they peed. They didn't know where to go when the condom broke. And I was like, why do we not have the supports for young people in the classrooms, but also for teachers? So how do we expect teachers to teach this stuff if they don't have training? So only 15% of Bachelor of Education programs, which at the time was Teachers College at the time. 15.5% have mandatory training in sexual health education. So we throw these teachers to the wolves and say, teach this really controversial subject, which you're not comfortable with, which parents are inevitably going to get pissed off about. And so I went back to do research in the field. I didn't even know the word sexology. I really just wanted to work with teachers and work with students. And then, of course, you graduate and you go knocking on the Toronto District School Board's door. Hey, here I am. And they're like, there's no job as a sexual health education consultant. So I started writing and speaking, and I started writing books, and I do a show with Playboy TV. And so I moved more into entertainment. But my passion is classroom-based education. And I still go back and try and do lots and lots of volunteer programming for teachers, parents, and students in Toronto every year.
So how did you jump from that to into the public eye?
It was kind of an accident.
It's a great story.
Yeah, so from an entrepreneurship perspective, it was a bit of an accident in that I was down at, here's the story. I was down in Mexico at this couples only, clothing optional, erotic themed resort. So it's called Desire Resorts, Google that. And I introduced myself to the manager, and he said, he's like an older Swedish guy down working in Mexico, and I was a young woman. He's like, you've got to come teach workshops. So I said, oh my goodness, I've got this international gig. I better make a website. So I put together a website, started writing, and as soon as you start writing and speaking, the press comes to you. Because people are constantly pitching press, right? But if you create a brand that offers value, they come to you. So that's really, Playboy TV called probably 6 months later, the publisher called 7 months later, so it all came together.
So were you running off of just social media, or were you actually just running off of doing seminars and stuff like that?
So it was a little bit of a mix of old media and new media, because this was 2010.
Oh, dinosaur media.
Dinosaur media. So traditional, my first gig, I remember I did something on CBC and CTV, and if you can speak on camera, they're obviously going to have you back, and if you have some data that perhaps other people haven't either distilled or have access to, they have you back. So it was a bit of an accident. Now I run, my monetization channel is speaking. So I speak, I think I've been in 35 cities this year, from Dubai to Geneva to Albuquerque to Nashville. And so that's what I love to do, is speak. And then, of course, I have the digital side, which in any business you have to have if you're going to stay relevant today.
So do you spend the same amount of time on both, would you say, or do you say the digital kind of eats up any of the time?
So I obviously have a team who assists assist a little bit with the digital, but the team can't speak. So I personally spend more of my time traveling and speaking. So Toronto is home, and I tend to come back on like Tuesday, Wednesdays, and then travel Thursdays onward.
So you spend a lot of weekends away.
All of them.
And you're married, right?
I'm married 16 years. Yeah. Well, you know what? We've only been married 11.
This is credentials right here.
Right? Right.
Like some people we've had on the show, I don't say any names, that talk about relationships, and they're not in one. It's like, so if I'm a real estate agent, I don't have a house, I don't own a house, I'm still renting, how am I going to believe you? You know what I mean? But you've been in this thing for 16 years and been successful at it.
Yeah,
so
you know
there's more
what?
to this game than just...
He's the other half, though. Like he's like 80% of the relationship. He keeps this relationship together. No, I don't.
80%?
He's amazing.
20-80?
Yeah, like I do all the theory, he does all the practice. Like I'm like, hey, we should really talk about these vulnerable feelings. He's like, let's talk about them. I'm like, no, let's just have a drink. So he's more practice what I preach. Yeah.
You learned well.
He's amazing. Amazing.
So you got the digital side of things that are keeping it popping. Right? You got your Instagram, YouTube channel.
Yeah, and I have digital courses as well. I have a lot of assistants. It's not like I'm up, 40 hours a day
But your
working
online,
on these.
Your online presence is awesome. Because I've watched a lot of your videos.
Thanks.
Learning. Something different you from before.
You know what I can do? I'm going to send you the webinar course.
Oh, yeah?
So you can learn like the W and all the moves.
What's the W?
The why?
The W? No, not dining at the Y, but it's similar. It's something you do with your hand where it goes in the shape of a W, and you use lots of lube. I'm in contract with Astroglide.
Isn't that,
So-
don't they
Here's
call
the
that the
plug.
chakra?
Shameless plug.
It's not insertive.
Oh, well, I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, the chakra is more like
Oh,
this.
okay, I know what you're talking
Yeah, the
about.
W is more on the outside.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't like to show you because then they lose it all. The listeners.
There's
But
a video going on. So
yeah,
actually right now,
we'll send you guys a video. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. There you go. That's the W.
That's the W.
The W. Yeah.
Did you just do the tongue movement as well?
Yeah,
Too, then?
that was more just me smiling.
You learn something every day.
Yeah.
So you went from teaching, and you got your idea of the sexual education. And one of the things I wanted to comment on is there something in your past where you went to they were called school nurses before, right? And in pretty much every 80s movie, there's a scene where someone's in love with a school nurse, or she takes advantage of the student.
What movies do you watch? That's a different channel.
No, what I'm saying is
Porky's,
Yeah.
Blue Nui.
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
They're really spat scattered
So
porn when you're...
that's where, maybe I would think of when I think of the school nurse. It was like, the high school nurse. But it really wasn't actually around that much. If you had, if you're burning piss, pardon my expression, when you peed, and you went to the school nurse, she's going to, kind of lecture you more or less.
That's a
Send you off to
shame.
a doctor, opposed to educate. So in other words, what I'm saying, you kind of shunned into feeling bad about having an experience, and you couldn't really hide it from your parents that way. More than likely, you get a call or something. So in a more
terrible.
progressive society, what we're dealing with now is there's more interaction, is what you're seeing.
What I see is young people are just willing to talk about things. I think that the way young people see sex is more nuanced. We have data actually showing in Canada, for instance, that fewer young people are having intercourse in high
what we wanted to touch
school.
on.
Yeah, the age of first intercourse has remained fairly steady over the past 3 or 4 decades.
Is it 14 or something?
No, it's about 16 and a half
Okay.
or so. And what we're seeing, though, data from 29,000 students in BC, so in West Coast of Canada, found that fewer students in high school are having sexual intercourse than 10 or 15 years ago. So we've got this idea that sex is all around us and the kids are not okay, but the kids are okay. And when they are doing it, because sexual health education is improving, they're more likely to be able to set their own boundaries, to say, no, I don't want that, yes, I want that, but with a contingency. And they're more likely to use condoms, they're more likely to talk about sex. And I think that, for instance, we see technology as inherently evil and dangerous, but I think it's actually a great thing that now they have one more means of communicating what they want. So when I'm speaking, you say it and you can't take it back. But with texting, I can write and say, no, that's not what I meant. And I can add feelings even if I don't have the vocabulary, right? We all communicate in emojis. And research shows that couples who use emojis when they text have more sex. So I'm constantly sending emojis. I'm like monkey, monkey, monkey poop or something.
The monkey's awesome.
Yeah, the monkey is the best.
So can we go into a dark side with this? Again, sorry for my voice, guys. You're talking about now the online presence and kids having less sex. and getting right into the topic of conversation, is it because you're watching more porn?
Oh, that's interesting.
Or video games, or too much estrogen in all the products.
Okay.
That's a good question too. The estrogen's major.
I wouldn't put it to any of those factors alone. I think that this is a generation that is very careful about everything, right? They are very cautious. They have been taught that there's danger around every corner. So I, in fact, think that because they have more information, they're not just falling into it. If they're deciding to have sex, it's because they've said, you know what, I want to have sex, as opposed to, I'm just drunk or high, because we know that with young people, data has shown that the first experience is often under the influence of drugs or alcohol. I think we're going to see less of that because we have more conversation. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say it's because of the estrogen. Porn is interesting. I've been talking about porn a lot, and so I think that, like, I'm a fan of porn, but I'm a fan of porn for entertainment, not for education. So there's no problem with watching porn, and in fact, the data says that men who watch porn are not desensitized, even though it's a huge industry, porn addiction, which is entirely not a recognized diagnosis whatsoever. Even though they're watching porn, they're still getting erections, they're still becoming aroused by the human experience. I think there's been a lot of hysteria around porn that's been unnecessary or unfounded. The real thing about porn is
fake news.
If you try and watch it and then emulate it, then you're in trouble. Like anything you watch on TV. So if I see these guys doing skateboarding tricks on YouTube, I don't think, I can do that. I got a skateboard. If I see people doing circus tricks in a show, I don't say, hey, I can twist my body through that little chair. So it's the same thing with porn. You have to know that these are sexual superstars. There is lots of post-production. Yep. There is lots of direction. They do this all day, every day, and this is their job. There's lots of lube, as there should be in your bedroom, yep. Right? There should be lots and lots of lube. There's lots of warm-up. Like, fluffers are a real thing. I've been on porn sets where they're trying to get the girls' nipples hard. Like, I mean, it is performative, and that's okay, right? Especially for entertainment. Like, we watch lots of things that are performative, or we could say fake, right? Yep. As long as we don't use it as our form of education, we're going to be okay.
So just strictly entertainment.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you can't be inspired or learn or do, pull pieces from it. Yep. But if you expect your entire relationship to reflect what you see in porn, that's, and we see that with young people. Like, you've probably heard of the Make Love Not Porn movement. And she talks about, dating younger women or dating younger men and how they all want to finish on her face. And she says, I'm not into that. And and if you're into that, that's okay too. My job is to say, whatever you're into, be into, and stop judging other people. Like, don't yuck someone else's yum. I work with a lot of non-monogamous couples, consensually non-monogamous, yep. And monogamous couples are like, something's wrong with them, or they're just cheat. And I'm thinking, I work with couples who've been together 35 years, and they are the happiest couples I've ever met. And it's not because they're consensually non-monogamous, but it's that they actually talk about sex, they talk about their needs, they communicate their insecurities, they admit when they're jealous, they have lower levels of jealousy and insecurity, actually, in consensually non-monogamous relationships. And I'm not an advocate of consensually non-monogamous relationships. I'm just saying, figure out what you want. Don't fall into the default. Like, if you get married because you've been dating 2 years, or you have a kid because you've been together 3 years, that's when the problems arise. You have to opt in order to actually reap the rewards of anything, whether it be monogamy or consensual non-monogamy.
So what do you think about this? I'm finding there's a lot of people that are talking about being polyamorous now.
Yeah.
Quite a considerable amount. And at a young age, we're talking about in their 20s. Very open about it. And both partners are totally... And I'm just kind of more of a traditional, so I'm getting used to understanding it. Because we grew up in an age where you're my property, I'm your property type of thing, mentality. Like, unless we're going to have this little thing on the side, whatever have you. How are you dealing with couples that are polyamorous but are having a negative reaction to one partner having sex with another person?
Well, that's
you're experiencing these type of...
That's interesting. So I don't do a lot of private practice, but certainly people in polyamorous or multiple partner relationships have problems. They have problems just the way monogamous people have problems. So monogamous people have sexual problems just having sex with one another. And so what basically, I guess the bottom line is, regardless of the type of relationship you're in, you run into very similar problems. The outcomes for consensually non-monogamous relationships, we might find as we collect more data, might be more positive because there are more in-depth conversations. There are no assumptions, right? Like, if the three of us are together, we have to communicate about what's allowed, what's disallowed, when am I spending time with you, when are we spending time all together. Like, you really have to get into the nuts and bolts of it. Whereas most people who get married today just assume monogamy. I always talk about this concept of monogamish.
Yeah.
Like, so you are monogamous, but you still look at other people, you still fantasize about other people. If you're going to be with the same person for 20 years, you damn well better talk about it and get turned on about it. You know, turned on. But I see couples who are not traditionally monogamous, but they don't touch anybody else, but their sex life is still hot after 25 years because they actually share their fantasies,
like
right?
Window shopping, right?
It
Zoom
is.
talking about it.
Yeah, it's the space that, this is the thing. We see infidelity rates around 24%. I believe they're quite a bit higher, but people lie in survey data. We see divorce rates somewhere between 41 and 48%, depending on how you calculate it.
54.
Yeah, you hear over, it's an interesting way of
Scary thing
calculating.
that's scary, don't do it.
Yeah, don't get married. Well, we see millennials don't want to get married,
Yeah.
right? So if the traditional, so-called traditional, it's not actually traditional, it's modern traditional, relationship is failing, like, let's do something about it, right? If you have a 50-50 chance in anything, you don't go for it.
Right.
So why are we
really
doing it
don't.
in marriage?
Yeah.
The problem is there's a chemical reaction when you fall in love. And when you fall in love, you got these dopamine, endorphin, serotonin rushes, and you actually can't imagine the negative. You can't imagine that someone would bore you. You can't imagine that someone doesn't hang up their towel when they're done in the bathroom. You can't imagine the bad that comes with the good, right? So you are literally blind in love in that first stage. And that's when you make the decision to be together, right? And we need that, otherwise nobody would ever be together. You have to actually be blind in love. But when you transition from passion to companionate love, it's a different chemical release, right? You're going to have more attachment via different chemicals, vasopressin and oxytocin. You don't need to memorize this, but ultimately, it's a chemical reaction so that I still care about you. I feel attached to you, but I don't want to tear into you. I don't want to rip your clothes off. And then we have this romantic idea that if we're meant to be together, I should always feel that way, and you won't feel that way. You will feel that way if you cultivate it, right? Be interesting. Do the things you did. We always, you'll always hear relationship experts say, "Go back like you were dating. Wash your car. Pick them up." But it actually, and those are probably mundane suggestions, but it works if you are mysterious. If there's a part of you that's unknown. If you spend time apart. If you create different lives that cross paths at times, you can still feel passion. Like, I'm apart from my partner, I would say like 60% of the time because of my travel for
That's what I was
work.
asking, if you travel
Yeah,
with you.
60, maybe even more. Like this year, it's been about 80% so far, okay? And it makes me love him more. He's so much more lovable when he's not next to me. And me, I'm terrible to be around, but if you miss me, you can love me. He's a lot more patient than I am.
Get good welcome home parties, though.
Yeah,
There you
like
go.
you cultivate that desire for one
Yeah,
another. You
sure.
cultivate the mystery. So we're making all the mistakes because I think we're falling into these romantic notions like, oh, I need to find my soulmate. There's no such thing as a soulmate, right? There's no data ever, and there never will be.
So happy you're saying this.
No, I think my partner is like amazing. He's just incredible, and I just think he's the most incredible person. But
Are you
it
saying that
doesn't.
'cause he's British?
Yeah, I know he just walked in. No, not because of that. But
Hey,
yeah.
Come on in for a second. Come in for a second.
But let me just say, before he walks in, I could be with other people. And I could cultivate a happy life with other people. This is a warning. Warning, Brad. So ultimately, if we give up on these romantic notions, if we give up on the idea of soulmates, you can have a happy relationship. And we have data showing that when you grow together, you are happier. When you believe in destiny, you have unhappy relationships. This is
kinda
not
like
destiny.
A learned behavior. Well,
Sorry.
we're kind of living in the safest times ever now. Like, the least amount of effort into putting into surviving.
were just
Whereas
talking about
before,
that.
we kind of needed each other to cohabitate.
Yeah.
I mean, male to
Yeah.
male, woman to woman, doesn't matter. Just for survival, right? And kind of like we had offsprings to help, so forth and so on. But now we don't really need that. So is that a time of us understanding, maybe? Or is that too self-indulgent? Like, there's a lot of religious perspectives. I'm not really a religious person, but I know there's a lot of pushback from that side.
That's interesting. I would say that even though we don't have to worry about survival, like food and shelter, and again, we're talking from a privileged position of the West, because there are people in the world who do have to worry about that. We still need social support, and we have a ton of data showing that, for instance, people who are in happy marriages have higher cancer recovery rates, higher recovery rates after heart attack. They live longer, especially men. Men really reap the benefits of relationships more than women. And what we see is for people who are single, they don't reap these rewards, but if they have strong social bonds, they can also reap the rewards of marriage without actually being married. So I don't think that we need each other less. I think that our needs have changed. And I think that social ties are still important. Like people talk about, like, oh, if you have a vibrator, does it replace a partner? Is social media replacing, human-to-human interaction? And I think that's total nonsense because people still crave that interaction. We may be on our phones when we're out to dinner or at the coffee shop, but guess what? We're out way more than we ever were. 30 years ago, there were no coffee shops that you sat in and worked. Those people who worked for themselves sat at home alone. So I think we really villainize change and progress and evolution, especially when it comes to technology. Hi.
So we're gonna have to ask your name first and foremost. So
You have to lean in.
It's just Brandon.
It's
That's
okay.
it. I should just leave it there.
So
Not even.
We'll call you B. We'll
Call
you
me B. That's
That's
what people
okay.
call me. Yeah.
So Brandon, quick question for you: were you this same guy when you met Jess?
No, not at all. When we got together, I was definitely. Well, you got to remember, we were a lot younger.
We were kids, man.
Yeah.
How old were you then?
I was 11.
She, and
He
I
was
was
42.
and I was 42. Yeah, that's the joke, right? Yeah. But no, I mean, I think like everybody else, you evolve over time. You become more comfortable or less comfortable with who you are, depending on how you're evolving. So when I look back 16 years ago, I was a different person. I struggled a lot with certain pressures from society as a male.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how deep we're getting into this conversation here, but
Go
like,
as deep as you want.
I suffered from a lot of insecurities. I mean, when we met, I was a barback at a nightclub.
Oh, no way.
And I was a
And
bartender.
she was the
yeah.
bartender, so I was kind of on the lower rung of the totem pole in that,
Hang on,
in that
this is how we
environment.
met. I asked if he wanted to hook up that night, and what did he say to me?
And the big answer was, I don't know. Because the words didn't come out of my
He
mouth.
really goes,
fast
Did you
enough.
repeat
Yeah.
that story to your friends that night and they slapped you? Or how did it work?
No, it
Too
was.
close.
Yeah, I don't even remember. I don't know. It was more just the surprise, pretty girl talking to you. It's like, it's like I'm surprised anything came out, but it had to be those words of all the words that came out. I will never live them down.
Good for you. You own it.
okay.
That's
But
okay.
yeah, there it is. So, I dealt with a lot of issues when we first got together because, I had a preconceived idea of what you had to be as a man to have a pretty girl as your partner. And I thought it was the successful, rich, good-looking, and like I struggled with that for the first few years where it was like, I need to prove myself. I needed to prove myself to society to validate having this woman who loved me, who cared for me deeply, and could care less as to what I did, or it was more about who I was. Did she say that?
I didn't care.
Right? No, who didn't care? No. So I spent a lot of time, I think, justifying or becoming something that didn't really matter to her, that mattered to society. And then I learned over time that, I was proving something to people that didn't really matter to me.
Right.
Now, I did build a successful business and I enjoy what I do and things are great, but looking back and reflecting back, I feel silly that I spent a lot of time trying to posture for other people when the truth is it didn't matter.
It's kind of like just part of being a guy.
Yeah,
It's just how it
and I think,
goes.
but I think guys, I've said this recently, we don't have the opportunity to interact with other guys and to kind of express those concerns without feeling perhaps like you're going to be judged. And maybe it's because I just don't care if somebody else wants to judge me as much as I did before. I still care. I don't care as much. Maybe it's because I feel like I've achieved a certain level of success that I can open up and say something. And I have a long way to go in terms of what I'd like to do, but, I feel happy with what I have achieved.
You feel more comfortable in your skin.
I do feel more comfortable, but it's taken, it's not like this happened overnight. This took a long time
Well,
to get
think
there.
of it this way,
right?
though, too. It was like, in all seriousness, if you knew what you know now, back then, would you become the same guy you are now? More
Yeah.
likely not.
No,
It's
that's
grow.
I
The
probably-
whole idea is to grow continually, right?
Yeah, and I think
You've
that's...
always, but I think you're overstating. Like, he's always had his feet on the ground. I don't know how to explain that. Like,
I've been the guy who's like, don't jump out of the plane. And
Yeah.
she's been the one like, let's jump out of the plane.
No, and it's not as though you were. I don't think you've ever been like you've always been very motivated and ambitious, but you're not like obsessed with work. You've always put me first. Like I've always known because we both work really hard. We work crazy hours. We're apart a lot, but I also know like if I need him at any moment, he's there.
So you
he's
guys are
there.
partners in life, really, which is kind of
Yeah.
like the new way of looking at things.
Yeah.
It's not so much
Yeah.
a business arrangement, what it might have been in the, say, the 80s and early 90s. Now you guys are partners in life, whereas
The
before,
support is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even that presents new challenges too, right? Like when you become partners on multiple levels.
We have some business investments together, endeavors together.
Sounds very business related.
No,
right
but it
now,
is, and then all you
that's
talk
what-
about is
but then-
business.
but then
yeah.
all you-
when you sign a contract, it's a business, right?
Yeah.
You're doing a legal transaction
Yeah.
with the government
Yeah.
when you get married. You know, we could break it down beyond and beyond, beyond, but that's essentially what it is.
Yeah.
When you get divorced, you're going to the government, you're begging them
Yeah.
to consider your side of the story, her side of the story, and they're going to reign how they feel they want it to go, right?
So I'm looking at things now though, and it does become a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Like everything does. I mean, I'm very interested in business. I
Yeah.
find it motivating. I find it interesting.
That's the downside of our relationship.
That's the downside is that we talk about
Business
work 24/7, and then the challenges are, how do you maintain that spark when it's 9:30, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and you're winding down for the day, and you need to go from turn the business side off or turn the family side off,
to turn the sexy time on.
yeah, like for real.
Well, usually
you know,
I know.
It's
like
I
I gotta-
usually know
yeah.
though because he puts on the leopard thong, and I'm like, oh,
one of the leopard
One of
thongs,
One of
right?
my leopard
depends,
thong,
depends
yeah.
how I'm feeling that day, right?
yeah,
But,
the green one. You like
yeah.
the green one, turquoise.
You know, people don't know me here, and they're creating
It's
this
okay.
picture in their mind that
Trying
it's
to-
not.
it just
Yeah,
happened.
yeah, it just happened. It's
You
my
know,
fault.
yeah, the big side goes in the front, and
Yeah.
the string doesn't go up the middle.
I put my eye patch on. You know, I just
Yeah.
put it.
I'm
Yeah.
just visualizing, what was that?
You finished that. You're visualizing what?
Actually, all I'm visualizing in all honesty is that one movie, what was it? The porn movie with Marky Wahlberg in it.
Oh,
Boogie Nights.
Boogie
Boogie
Nights,
Nights,
yeah.
remember when they go to pick up more cocaine? And the guy's throwing firecrackers everywhere, and the guy's dancing around in his thong.
Is that what you're? That's my sexy time, and that's what I.
I'm like,
yeah,
this is
yeah.
what they're entertaining.
Well, I'm glad we. That's where we're going. in this
Thanks.
conversation.
Thanks for coming in.
So you leave them to be totally open with the sex and all that kind of stuff, and you're engaging and not feeling weird about any of it.
I mean, of course.
It's obviously comfortable, right?
I mean, I think you're comfortable, but you're also, there are times when you're not. And then when you're not, you need to be able to convey in words that you're not and feel comfortable with your partner. That it's like, listen, we're going down an avenue here where I don't know that I'm 100% on board with this, or at least feel open enough to have that conversation so that you can fix it or you can address it, like confront it, see how you feel. I
And
don't
not
think
do
there've been.
something you regret, right?
No,
Because I
no,
think,
no.
like, especially in my field where you're like, I go to sex parties, I'm speaking at sex workshops, I'm at sex clubs, I'm at these resorts. It's really easy to find yourself in a position where you're like, and especially for me as a young woman, when I first started going to these spaces, I'm not really taught to say no. I'm not taught to say I'm uncomfortable. Like, you're very much in a people pleasing mindset, right? That's my default. And so I think in the beginning, like, I kind of always had you speaking for me because I don't want to offend anyone. Like, as a young woman, God forbid somebody doesn't like you, right? And like my whole life is people who don't like me sending me hate mail. And so you're always trying to please so many people, and that's a Canadian thing too. Like, I work in media in the States and they want me to be controversial there.
Yeah.
Here in Canada, they're like, don't upset anybody. So you're trying to keep
Sure,
the
right.
left, middle, right happy, and it's an impossible task. But I think that, like, I had to learn to stand up and say I'm not into that, or that makes me uncomfortable. And like, let me be really clear. Like, I can talk about this stuff from a data perspective, from a research perspective, with no concerns whatsoever. But when it comes to my own sex life, like, I got problems, I got things I'm nervous about, I've got things that I have hang-ups, I have things I suck at. Like, I
He
struggle.
says no.
No, I don't think there's too many. I'm pretty
but
pleased.
I struggle with things. That's not true. I struggle with stuff too. And I get violated too, right? Like, people think they can tell me anything, right? Like, I can be at a dinner party, a formal dinner party, and some guy walks up and is like, so I was masturbating the other day. And you don't know if they're really struggling and don't know whom to speak to, or they're trying to get off on speaking to you. And there's always a power dynamic too, right? Where they believe they can speak to you this way.
That's fucking weird. That's just
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
and then but I mean, and then I can only imagine. Then you address somebody and you kind of challenge or you push back, and it's like,
And then I'm
hey,
a jerk.
hey, that's inappropriate. Well, I was only asking you a clinical question.
But the thing is, I'm not
You
in
know what I mean?
clinic.
Well,
I'm drinking 3 glasses of wine
No, it's-
before dinner.
Yeah, I don't go to a dinner party with a doctor and then like drop my drawers and I'm like, I got this problem here. You know what I mean? So
You don't do that.
No, I don't do
Everyone
that.
conceivably would call you an idiot.
Yeah.
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 And I think we can all agree that guy was an idiot.
Well, and I mean, that's normal for me, right? That's very, very normal for me. And to be fair, some people are just so desperate with these sexual problems and they have nowhere to turn that they just see me as this oasis in the desert. And honestly, there are some people who are not trying to violate me and not trying to demean me.
They're genuine with you.
They're just lost. Like, they really are lost because there are not enough resources out there, right? Like, I'm a big supporter. If you want to go into this field and I can help you, I want to help you. Alicia will tell you, I want more people in this field.
So have you thought of opening up an actual practice then?
Yes.
I know you've been talking, you're pretty mobile, you've got a game plan. Being rooted down in one spot, is that something you're looking for in the future?
No,
or
never.
It's just so not your way?
You can't pin me down.
Yeah.
No, so I do a very, very small e-practice, and then I refer out to really wonderful people. So if you're looking for a counselor or a therapist, I'm always happy to help you with Yeah, we have great people all over, and the good news is finally counseling is catching up to technology. So like, even if you're in Barrie and you need a therapist, and the best therapist I have is someone in LA, you can connect with them via these therapy platforms.
Video chats as well, right?
Video chat, yeah, and you can still see the nuance and the facial expression and the body language, and we see efficacy rates that are fairly high for e-therapy as well. So I can definitely help people, and it's my pleasure to help set you up, because I'm not going to be the right fit. I'm not the right fit because, like, I change time zones too often, and I'm not reliable in any way. Yeah, I'm not reliable, so it wouldn't be ethical for me to take people on or coach them.
So, if we can talk about, this is I'm going to ask your personal opinion on the social media aspect of Tinders and the Grinders and the Bumble. And for somebody that's relatively pretty single, I noticed there's a quick dynamic where people are losing okay, so we had to have skills to pick up a girl in the bar. And that dynamic is gone. And now people think...
Hold on, it's not gone, because remember, the game came out.
Well, there's a...
Neil Strauss wrote the book The Game, and everything just escalated. I'm being facetious.
I know you are. So there's a small portion. So I'm trying to think this out, because there's a small portion, I don't know how to call it, what it is, what it is, that we're missing, that dynamic between going up to seeing that girl, getting the butterflies, and then the sexual attraction is there. That's already gone, because you already know when you're on the social media platforms that I'm getting laid, so I don't have to try those skills that we all grew up having to hone in on, to master, to get a girl or a guy.
I don't know that we've lost those skills. I think that there's a shift and there's a broader spectrum of skills that pay off. So it's funny because I have a buddy who's very smooth and can talk to any woman. Dude carries a freaking harmonica in his vest. And he's very smooth. I mean, he's married with kids now and he's very dedicated to his wife. But we used to party together and he was very comfortable approaching girls. And he complained many, many years ago when online dating kind of came to the surface and became more popular. He's like, well, now, guys who never could approach a girl can get girls. And I'm like, well, this is an advantage that you had because you had a very specific set of skills. Yeah. Now bars still exist. There are still these spaces in which more traditional approaches, and again, I use that word, that means modern traditional, still function and still pay off. But now there are different ways to approach people, multiple ways to connect. I mean, Tinder's an interesting one because many couples are actually meeting for love and getting married via Tinder. We see it on Tinder. We even see it on Grindr for gay guys. It's not as though they're only hookup apps, even though they started as such. So, for instance, if you take Snapchat and the disappearing messages, like people will think, oh, it's for dick pics. But it is the primary means of communication for most young people. They're not sending dick pics.
Facebook kind of went out.
Yeah, because we're on Facebook. Yeah, they don't want to be on Facebook with their moms.
I've said that many times, man.
Yeah.
That's why we're not on there.
Yeah. So I think there's a shift. I think it's actually a really great thing that we have multiple means of connecting and picking people up. I'm an optimist. I also love technology, and I'm kind of tired of people villainizing technology, right? This idea that things are getting worse. And I think that apps like Tinder are great for some people. And the thing with being on Tinder is some people are on Tinder and they're also on Match.com and they're also on Zapeel. And there are all these cool new apps, like Zapeel is one where it's a video dating app. So you can't fake the way you can a photo.
right.
Yeah, and then there's another one called Happen without the E, and you can meet people who you cross paths with, and I love this because I'm such
think
like
I've
a
read
community
about this
person. Yeah, so I can see who every morning I'm walking past the same people at my local coffee shop, or every afternoon.
The bus stop.
Yeah.
Exactly, and so then we might be in the airport together, and it shows that, oh my gosh, someone from my local coffee shop, Sumac Espresso, is in the airport. Let's grab a drink.
It's not like misconnections. Isn't there like a section that leads
Yes,
Yeah.
it's the modern
awesome.
misconnection.
That's awesome.
It's like my dream for someone to say, like, saw you on the elevator, you took my breath away. That never happened, but that would have been so cool.
Watch you swing drinks. That's what happens.
So hot when you spilled it on yourself. I love that.
Yeah. But back to the digital thing, what you're talking about, I think really what it comes down to is how you meet somebody is part of the game. But don't
How
forget,
you
you still
interact.
actually have to connect with someone
Of
and
course.
interact with them to make it work for
Yeah.
you. So it's kind of like the guy who's a bit shy,
Yeah.
but he's got enough balls or
Yeah.
mustered up to go talk to the pretty girl.
Yeah.
Right.
She's already approved him to a degree, so you can't be like, oh, I'm going back to the car. What if she doesn't like my shirt? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right, and apps like Bumble let the women make the first move, and I'm a big,
Bumble's great.
I'm a big advocate of just shattering these gender norms. I think that actually half of my work would be eliminated if we weren't worried about traditional norms of masculinity and femininity. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be feminine if you're a woman, or you shouldn't be traditionally masculine, but I just think that there's more difference among than between. There's a lot of crossover, and a lot of the relationship problems, like for instance, the number one problem I saw when I was doing more private practice, and still in my travels everywhere in the world, honestly, is frequency. So once you've been in a relationship for 4, 5, 6, 16 years, sexual frequency is always an issue because you're never going to line up perfectly. But the second one is initiation, the complaint that only one partner initiates. And when one partner initiates, only one partner has to face rejection. The power dynamic gets tilted. They stop initiating because they're tired of being rejected. They build resentment, and this is a pattern you see in so many relationships. And it is very, not in all cases, but very strongly rooted in gender, right? That men should do the initiation, that women, we feel like, well, if I'm hot enough, he'll come after me. I know, like, I worry about that too. Of course, everybody likes to feel wanted. Of course, everyone wants to feel pursued and
Human nature,
sexy,
right?
but men need to feel that too. Like, I think
Absolutely.
straight men in particular don't get enough attention. Like, you need to know that you're amazing. I love women, complimenting or not hitting on, like, being rude and disrespectful of me, but letting him know that
Testing the
he's,
waters with
he's amazing, and he should know he's amazing. And I've been with him 16 years, so when I tell him how amazing he is, I still say it, but I think it rolls off of him in a different way. It's like your mom telling you you're pretty, sort of thing.
Or funny.
Yeah.
Or funny.
He still appreciates it, and like for myself, I have been in situations where they don't want to give me compliments because they think it's going to go to my ego. I'm like, no, honestly, I truly appreciate you saying anything nice because I'm going to do the same thing for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not an ego thing, and I'm not going to try to master and dominate you in a
Yeah.
way because you said you look gorgeous today or whatever have you.
Yeah.
And it's very rare. And a lot of guys talk about this a lot as well too.
If you're playing games and you don't want to compliment your partner because it might go to their head, there's bigger issues than the
that's
compliment
so
itself.
scary.
I find too, with very, I guess, traditionally attractive people, their partners don't say it because they're like, well, obviously he's hot, or obviously she's beautiful. I used to see that in practice.
be with them.
But they also think, well, like, especially like women, you get attention everywhere you go, right? Men don't get that. You don't turn to each other and say, you look good today. Girls, we do that to
I
one
said that
another
to
all
you
the
the other
time.
day.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I do.
No, and that's great, and you accept that compliment graciously. Compliments are we know that, for instance, millennials are more motivated by a compliment than a cash bonus at work.
Well, so is that not the theory behind what's going on with all the social interactive that's happening, as well as all the likes, how many views am I getting,
Yeah.
how many friends? It all feeds the same chemical thing, does it not?
Serotonin boost,
Serotonin.
yeah.
No, it's just a thing to me, though.
Yeah.
The
It's
child-
the dopamine levels.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, dopamine's
So
more
that's
like
where the
pleasure.
addiction with the social media thing
Yeah.
happens in contact with what we're speaking of.
Right,
Sure, if
so
everybody walked by, imagine this: you walk down the street and guys
Like-
are giving
like-
you a thumbs
like.
up, thumbs up, publicizing, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Well, that would release the same thing, more or less.
Yeah.
Emoji heart, emoji heart.
Yeah.
I guess you're right. Well, the challenge is what about when people don't like your stuff or don't comment, or you look at your friend who gets a lot more. And so whether you're online or in person, I think people, first of all, you need to know you're awesome and that you're good. And I always use like the 88 rule, which I'm pushing now to the 99 rule because we're going to live longer. But the big question is, will you care about this when you're 88 years old. Like when you're fighting with a friend, when you're fighting with a partner, when you're worrying about like your weight, or when you're thinking about these things that seem to consume you in the moment, is this going to matter to me when I'm 88, right? So I always try and use that in the relationship, because I tend to be like a little dramatic, where I love him, and then he does one thing, I'm like, I hate that guy, he's the worst. And so I have to remind myself, will this matter at 99 years old?
Right.
And so I think it's the same thing with likes and comments. Like, you have to look for genuine support in your social network, online and in person, and not be comparing. Because I know I'm going to have friends who get 500 likes and I only get 200 or 3 or whatever it may be.
What's the cutoff on Facebook for friends?
5,000.
5,000. So how about, what's that rule that there's only so many names you can remember in your head? I can't remember. Rogan always talks about
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Oh, there's one piece of research that talks about like how many friends you can actually have,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So like
So-
3, 5, 7, and then everyone else is more periphery. I actually think it's great that social media is changing that. Like, I think it's cool that you can be connected in different ways to different people, as long as you're maintaining the social support. Because it's nice to have likes and comments and, hey, you're beautiful, or you look hot. But in the end, like, when you need someone, who do you call?
Yeah.
Right? And
Your
not to
friends.
get cheap. Yeah, you're real friends, right?
Well, that's kind of what my point was. is that
Yeah.
You could have five. You know what? I was a promoter for 20 years.
Yeah. So you know a ton of people.
I know. I go out. I know a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
My point is that I can only remember so many names. I'm good with faces. However, not in my lifetime do I ever think that I'm going to run into 5,000 people.
Yeah.
We used to do events with 20,000 people, and that's like 1/4 of. There's no way in hell that
Mm-hmm.
you can spend. So what
Spend your
makes
lifetime.
people think that how that could be practical? That works somewhat in their real life. It's just, you know what I mean? The race to the first to get 5,000. There's a competition across the board.
Yeah.
It's kind of like with Instagram, where women are more visual about certain things, and they seem to be drawn more to Instagram. And it's all about getting the likes too, and everything just gets riskier and riskier. Do you know what I mean? The guidelines have got to the point where there are no nudity and whatnot, but they just erase a little bit of their nipple.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's not considered.
Free the nipple.
Yes,
Free the nipple.
for sure.
Well, we also see fights with couples in terms of, let's say you're on Instagram and you seem to be liking is girls in bikinis, and your partner gets jealous.
Yep.
And people laugh and make fun of these things, but this is really no different than what happens in real life, right? And so we just need to talk about it. I know Bryn and I actually were talking about this. We have a good friend, Roxy Delight, who's a burlesque dancer, and she's like incredibly hot. It's ridiculous. She's basically the sexiest woman in the world. And her photos, of course, are very, very sexy.
And she's on Instagram?
She's on Instagram, Roxy Delight.
Delight or Delight?
Like just D and then Lite. She's a famous burlesque dancer.
There you go.
And Brandon was like, sometimes I don't want you to think that I'm only liking her, like they're basically close to nude pics. And I'm like, first of all, Roxy's a friend. But I think the fact that you say that to me says at least you're considering how I feel. And it might be, first of all, I love to talk about this. Jealousy and insecurity are universal. You are never going to rid yourself of negative emotions and vulnerable emotions. And all you need to do is do something functional with them. Like, I feel jealous, I feel insecure. What do I do with it? Do I pout? Do I lash out? Do I talk about how, Roxy's this or Roxy's that? Or do I say, hey, she's got something I want. Can I have it? Right? Can I get some of that? I can't get her sexy, honestly. There's no one who can get her sexy. But she's one of a kind. Yeah, and I'm just not that. I don't think soft. But I also, like, what can I work on in myself so I feel better, so that I'm not worried? Right? I can't be everything and I can't be everything and everybody. So I want couples and people to say, yeah, I get jealous. Yeah, I get insecure. Instead of using those two things as an insult, I hear people say, like, oh, you're just jealous. Yeah, I'm jealous. So what do I do with it? Right? I say that, you can be jealous in business and say, oh man, like they're doing this. Well, I can emulate, I can learn from them, I can support them, I can collaborate. You have all these options, or I can just bash them. Right, so which one am I going to choose? Same thing in relationships. So I see him talking to someone and I feel a little bit jealous, maybe because she's dismissive of me or she's just stunning or whatever the case may
Goes
be.
beyond what he could possibly understand.
Right. So what do? Do I bash the girl? Do I tell him he can't see her? Do I say, like, tell me I have nothing to worry about? Right, and that's just such an easy thing to say if you have a sound relationship. But let's say I say, like, tell me I have nothing to worry about, and he says something like, oh, you're jealous. Well, that's what I'm saying. Don't demean my emotion. Don't expect me to. I hear people pretending they've never been insecure and they've never been jealous, and that's like saying you've never been happy or sad. We've got this range of human emotion, and when we embrace it, we can do something positive with it. Like the first step is saying, yeah, sometimes I suck. Sometimes I'm jealous.
Just own it, really.
Own it, yeah.
And then find a way to work through it.
Exactly. Yeah, and if you have a supportive partner, they're a part of that. Like it's 80% your job, 20% your partner's.
So it's part of what you're essentially saying is the key to having a successful relationship. And by successful, I mean fully rounded. You know what I mean? Being able to communicate, being able to experiment, and in the middle as well, right? Finding your little pocket, I guess, where you guys can exist together, and it's that bliss the whole time.
Yeah, and I mean, it can't be bliss the whole time.
No, but we're all seeking that. Right?
Yeah, 80%. Like I just think you can have 80% of what you want, and and people always say, "Oh, the most important part is communication," but it's also talking about the negative stuff. It's having fights. Like couples who have small fights tend to ward off the bigger fights. Because people will also say, oh, we've never had a fight. I have couples who walk in and tell me they've never had a fight. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a nightmare. You've never had a fight? Because it's absurd. You have to fight. Well, and people will, but they lie, right? They say they're not fighting because they're harboring negative emotions. They're building resentment.
They're still doing their same whole mini PR thing that they do online, the whole social media thing, where they're not being real. And this, I know it's coming back to it, but there's a reason for it, is that I think essentially that that social media side of thing will expire on its own. It'll go down in flames.
What do you mean?
Everything's gotten to the point where each person is their own PR agent.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
You have a personal brand regardless of whether you're a personal brand.
Now, what my thoughts are is that over time, it's just everything gets plastic. It goes through an extreme process. It starts out, next thing you know, 10 years from now, it's more extreme. And it's gotten more extreme in the past 10 years. I think it's about time people just got real. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think the authenticity of it all is going to change, but you got to keep in mind
that's going to be the new edge, though, is being authentic.
Authentic,
yes,
well, like social media is never going to go away, so we just got to accept that. I think what's going to happen is like as it evolves into something else, that authenticity is going to have to come out of people, because now you're going to be like, so for instance, there's influencers, but if you're an influencer and you say, listen, I'm having a party for a brand, and only 5 people show up, but you have 50,000 followers. We're talking like fake.
Right.
So that authenticity, as things evolve into, like, say, VR, because that's what we're going next with social media. You're going to be able to point out, like, who's real and who's not. Like, okay, like, you're a little bit too much on that edge. The makeup aspect of things of girls dancing with their faces starting to come down. And all
that's
that kind of
great.
stuff to make it more realistic. Like,
yeah.
You're actually really beautiful without that on. So you need to do it,
Yeah, we see that. We see people not editing photos and really calling out. Yeah, and I mean, listen, we all live with a filter, right? We all live with some filter. So it's not like Instagram brought the filter. But we're seeing, we do. I mean, I struggle with, I share parts of my relationship on my social media. But I don't always want to share the negative because I'm still working it out. Do you know what I mean? Like this whole relationship is a process. Like Brandon and I don't have it figured out. We have it figured out this minute, and then in 10 minutes we might be pissed at each other. And so I think part of people sharing their highlight reel is also drawn from the pressure to be positive, right? It's not always that you're trying to be fake, but sometimes you're just trying to be positive, especially think young women, right? We're not supposed to complain. We're not supposed to criticize. We're not supposed to be negative. And so the ones who come out and share that side, people are drawn to them. Right? I mean, I have so much respect for Brandon coming on and saying like that he feels vulnerable. Like I'm like, that's cool, because a year ago or 2 years ago, I don't think that's something he would have said.
Right.
Yeah. So and then we're always evolving. Like you ask if we're the same people. My God, he's got like, poor guy's been stuck with 100 versions of me since we moved in together. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing though. Well, that's the whole point. Is as long as we're all growing, we're not the same person we were a year ago, right?
God, I wouldn't want
Be
to.
the same
No. That's another thing people say. Oh, you've changed. Like, and
That's great.
I hope so. It's growth. Right? And commitment to growth, I believe, is the 6th love language. Like, they talk about love languages like physical touch and gifts of time and words of affirmation and acts of service. I think that the 6th one is this commitment to growth, because when I see that you're willing to grow for yourself and for me, I feel loved.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's something there, too.
Together, even at that point.
Yeah.
How much time do we have with you?
You know what? I actually have to run.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so let's do this.
Let's explain this out though. We had 2 mics.
Yeah.
And
do we need to?
Yes, we do need to. And we had a technical difficulty. We tried to work it out, so it ate into our time with Jess.
Yeah.
So we have 1 mic, so it sounds a bit off, guys, compared to the last one we did. But her voice is angelic as ever. Only if you could see her smile through the mic.
Oh my.
Maybe not.
Oh my.
Yeah, exactly. What was that?
That was good.
I think we both are getting sick, by the way.
Guys, don't breathe on me, man.
I was yelling.
Yeah,
I was
he's just
yelling.
loud.
It's called
I was
Yeah.
yelling at the TV last night. I've been yelling at this Raptors series.
So if people want to get a hold of you and explore some more on you, can you tell us how to do so?
Yeah, you can find me at sexwithdrjess.com, and all of my social media is Sex with Dr. Jess, and the doctor's just DR.
Now, what about Twitter? Are you
Yep.
on it a lot?
Yeah, we're on.
Best way for someone to get a hold of you. If they say they had a problem, they didn't want to walk up to a restaurant and say, I've been masturbating. Just Twitter you or DM you.
Yeah, the website contact form, and we have a team that helps out with it as well. So if you go to sexwithdrjess.com, you can send questions, and sometimes we use your questions for the podcast and for different questions on Facebook Live and stuff. We would never call you out, but chances are if you have a question, 100 other people have the same question just within your 3-block radius.
Now, what's your podcast?
We have Sex with Dr. Jess podcast, and we talk about everything from the theoretical underpinnings of what makes relationships work to P-play and double-ended dildos. So we talk about everything, and I try and take.
Sorry, did you just slide in double-ended dildos under your breath?
Yeah, just
Okay.
double-ended dildos, those things. Yeah, triple Ds.
P-play double-ended dildos.
Yeah, and so we try and take the latest research or story and distill it so that there's information you can use tonight. Because you got to work on your relationship. If you don't work on your relationship, it won't work on itself. You will fail, ultimately.
Yeah.
If you think that destiny will bring you together, you're in big trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
This is awesome. This is awesome. Well, thank you very much. I think you can talk right now, so do the talking, because I'm forcing my voice out. And I hope at least it sounds relatively sexy for everybody else that doesn't know me, never met me before. But Jess, it's a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
Like I said, we were super stoked to have you. We needed somebody to come and talk about sex with people in the city. It's obviously, like you mentioned before, it's a problem where people feel very vulnerable coming out and talking about it. So we would love to have you back on.
Be my pleasure.
When the mics are working properly, everything's set up properly.
When it's a bit quieter, we're at the Wine Conservatory in downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
And we thought we were here early enough to get the room kind of ourselves, but we shared it.
Yeah.
It's
I
okay.
think we did well. It was great that your husband had a chance to come down.
Yeah, I'm lucky he was picking me up, actually.
We're very lucky to have him on. And again, everybody, keep the emails coming.
Yes.
And DM Chad, because he does all the social media.
Yeah, I'm on it. So yeah, just DM us at Instagram if you want, and thecitypodcastca@gmail.com. Next podcast, we'll have everything up ready to go professionally at the City Podcast for you. So this is Chad Cranston.
I'm Steve Mueller.
And we are out.
And Steve Mealing.